Welcome everybody. Welcome to Keough's Corner Remote. We have not done this before, and I'm really looking forward to it. I have some great guests with me today. Merritt Sullivan, maybe you guys could give a quick wave. Merritt Sullivan, grade 11. Michael Jalillo, grade 11. Lila Maker, grade 11. Charlie Alfieri, also 11th grade. Luke Latterman, 10th grade. And Jackson Carolyn, grade 11. So thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know you got a lot going on, and that was a joke. But thank you really, seriously, for doing this. I think people at home during this very strange time will enjoy hearing from you, and hopefully we'll get something out of the questions you have for me. So I think Merritt was going to start us off with some questions. You want to fire away, Merritt?
Sure. Okay, so the first question is, how are you, and where have you been working during our off time, or time off?
Great question. So, I'm fine. Like the rest of us, I would argue that we're all kind of going crazy, right? I mean, we can't do the things we normally do, so that part has been frustrating for me. And I've actually been working. Sometimes I work at home, and sometimes I work here in the office. Trying to keep the visits to the office fairly down, so maybe like somewhere between 2 to 4 days a week in the office, and then the other days at home. I just basically pull my computer and grab it and run, and I can do these meetings at home. We're not having any meetings in school, so everything's remote, just like this. So it really doesn't matter where I do it. But I do think it's important for people to see me here from time to time, and people will tell me they've driven by and seen my truck. But we have a tiny little crew here because we're trying to be smart about social distancing and stuff. So I'm doing fine and pretty much hanging out here. Who's next? Charlie, I think.
Yeah. So, what does your typical day look like as an administrator these days?
Yeah. Well, my typical day is I am either writing letters to someone, it feels like, responding to emails, because there are a lot more emails, having meetings with my 3 school committee chairs, because we have 3 school committees here. A lot of times people don't know that, but we have the regional committee, which is for 6th through 12. We have the Dover School Committee, and then we have the Sherborn School Committee. So we have kind of meetings every week. Normally it'd be once a month that we would meet to talk about what's going on, but we're actually doing that quite a bit more often. I'm having meetings with my central office team. So that would be Ms. McCoy, the assistant superintendent, Don Fattori, the business administrator, and Kate McCarthy, our director of student services. We meet every week. I'm meeting with the leadership team, so that would be that people that you know, Mr. Smith. Well, you know probably all of them, but you know, Mr. Smith, Ms. Keegan, and Mr. Kellett, and Mr. Robleski over in the middle school. And so that group meets, and we talk about how all this remote learning is going to work, and we talk about what kinds of tweaks we need to make, because the governor canceled school. Remember, we left on a Friday. Do you guys remember that? I think it was Friday, March 13th, to be exact. Was it? Yes, it was. March 13th was our first day out. And at that time, we were kind of the trailblazers, right? We were out there closed, and the governor that day said he didn't think it was necessary for schools to close. So that wasn't very much fun because I felt like a fool. And then by Sunday, he canceled school for everyone. So, but every time he closed the state and the schools, we get guidance from the Department of Ed, and they say this is what the remote learning should look like. So we try to follow that guidance, but it changes, right? So it's changed again this week now that we got the announcement last week from Governor Baker that we're going to be closed through the rest of the year. There's a new set of guidance for remote learning, which you guys will be hearing about soon. So, we're busy with this stuff. It's amazing how busy I am. I didn't expect to be on these kinds of meetings, and I also didn't expect to be exhausted. Somebody said to me, it's like intensive daily living, and it is. It's intense. It's intense. I don't know why. The relationships at home, the work, the emails that I get are intense. People are worried and anxious. So I've been busy. Good question. Told you I talk a lot. All right, I think it's you, Michael.
All right. So what's happening on campus while we're all gone, and like, is there any work being done in the schools or on the campus?
So, somebody once said to me that schools are really just a shell without the kids and teachers, and it's really, really true. It's almost spooky. When I was a principal, I would be in the building frequently in the summer when there was no one there, and it was creepy. It was like, it's just eerie, because think about how many bodies come in and out of our building every day, and all the movement that you guys do from one class to the next. It seems so just vacant. It's like a vacant lot. There's no one here. The grass looks great because Mr. Hendricks and Jackson Schroeder are able to take care of the grass because they're outside the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. So they've just been plugging away. So I'll be sitting here and I'll see the tractors go by, but really it's kind of sad. It's disheartening. The trees are beautiful. Everything looks gorgeous over here. This time of year is just, the campus looks very nice. We are taking advantage of the opportunity to do some of the work we would have done in the summer. So, for example, and if I was on my phone as opposed to my laptop, I'd point the camera over there because I can look right out at the student lot, but it's all been repaved. All the sidewalks, the pathways between the commons and the high school have all been redone. And it just looks, really, really nice. We've done some work in the buildings. We've been switching over to LED lighting behind the scenes, and probably unbeknownst to the kids. You might have noticed the difference in the lighting, but we've been doing that for a while. It's a real cost saver, and it's better use of energy. We're trying to be responsible in that way. And so we have someone, he comes in by himself and works on it, and he's just been chipping away at that. So, and really across the system, we've got some projects that we're going to start now that we know that school's closed. We were going to do them in the summer. We're going to tackle them right now. We're going after it. So, and by the way, the people who do this kind of work, they're looking for the jobs, right? So that's pretty much it. Lilla, you have another question?
Yeah. How do you think the DS community is handling the whole situation?
I think the DS community is handling the situation incredibly well, to be honest with you. I sit on meetings with Board of Health members, and both towns handle things a little differently. Raise your hands, actually, if you're from Dover. It's always helpful for me to get a sense. You guys are from Dover, and Charlie, you're from Sherborn. And I don't know about Jake, Jackson, and Luke, but Jackson, where are you from?
I'm Sherborn.
You're Sherborn. And Jake, can you hear me? Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm Dover.
You're Dover. And
Dover
Luke?
as well.
Dover. Okay, so we're predominantly Dover here. Well, I'm from Sherborn, so we're holding up the fort here. But no, both towns are handling it a little differently, but they are staying actively engaged. And what I've been impressed by is the way people are coming together, I know that gets overused, like we're all in this together. Somebody said to me recently, if I hear someone say we're all in this together one more time, I'm going to smash my television. But I sort of get the point, right? Which is that people are trying to get through this. We've got people who are not doing as well. We've got people who've lost jobs, even in places like Dover, Sherborn. That happens. We've got people who are working on the front lines. There's a doctor that I've been in touch with from time to time from Sherborn, who works at the Brigham in the COVID unit. I mean, he is on the front lines. We hear from people, they're very anxious because they're frontline essential workers, and we're assigning work for their kids to do, and they're like, I don't have time to help with the teaching. That is one of the things that we hear a lot about, is that we can't do the same amount of teaching that we would traditionally do, right? How can we? Because our teachers also have families and their kids have assignments, and our parents may have kids at 3 different grade levels, which was the case for me. I had a kid at the high school and the middle school and Pine Hill all at the same time. That's a lot of juggling. So I think it's been stressful for people. But I look around, I mean, I live over on Great Rock in Sherborn, and I walk out in the neighborhood and I see all the kids having a good time. And I'm not going to lie, guys, to me, it's been sort of refreshing to see kids doing the things that I did when I was a kid. Now, raise your hands if you've ever seen, I mean, if your parents have ever said, oh my God, it's so much different. When I was growing up, we did this, we did that. Have you ever heard your parents say that? And believe it or not, what I'm seeing out in my neighborhood is kids doing the stuff that we did. I see kids skate. I saw a kid skateboarding down the street the other day on his or her belly, lying on their stomach on a skateboard. And I was like, that's so dangerous. But I was also thinking, that's the kind of stuff kids did when I was growing up. We made jumps with our bicycles, and we made paths, and we had races, and it's just interesting. I'm finding that the kids, I saw them down in this little brook one day down at the end of our street. They were trouncing around the brook. One kid came out in his socks. They were black with mud. And I was like, nice. I mean, that's awesome. That's what we used to do. So, I think people are adapting, and there will be positive things that come from all this. But what we're trying to say to kids, to all of you guys, is like, don't just sit back and watch TikTok. Go outside, get creative, do something fun. Do something, use your imaginations, Did you guys grow up with Barney the dinosaur? Did you ever hear of him? He came after you. Oh my God, well, you weren't missing much. But it was a show on PBS, and this Barney the dinosaur, would give all these speeches about all the good things that we should be doing, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things he used to say is, imagination. Use your imagination, children. And that's actually really what we'd like for you guys to do, is be imaginative. And I look around, I see the kids, doing these things on their bicycles or their races or the forts they're making or whatever it is they're doing. And I think it's awesome. And it may be just at the computer writing, or, forming clubs or organizations or supporting people in need. There's just a lot of really cool stuff going on. And so I think the communities are handling it well, all things considered. So then somebody want to take another question?
I'll take one.
Okay.
Do you have any concept of how grades will look for the 3rd and 4th term this year?
Yeah, so I was in a discussion with Mr. Smith, Ms. Keegan, and your department heads last week, I think. And I know they have some ideas about how we will work this out for the high school anyhow. And obviously it's pass-fail. Everything is pass-fail, but the question really is whether the weighting should be the same, right? Should the 4th quarter be weighted equal to the 3rd quarter, or that which you completed of the 3rd quarter, or the 1st or 2nd quarter? And I think the conclusion is it can't really be weighted the same way, because you guys can't do the same amount of work that you were doing when you were in school. And so I think that the 4th quarter will be weighted differently, and the 3rd quarter will probably be weighted differently because we were 4 weeks shy of finishing it. So 1st and 2nd quarter will probably carry more weight. And actually, I'm curious what you guys think about that. How do you think the grading should be worked out?
To be honest, I think that I think Mr. Smith talked about it when we did our show that they might make it optional if like you want your midterm 3 to like count towards your GPA. And I think that like that would kind of help people if they can make that choice because like just me, like I had a concussion in like third term and that was kind of a setback and my grades like up until we left school just weren't as great. So I think that would be nice to have the choice. So
What do you think about fourth quarter?
it's definitely interesting with all the pass fail and like I noticed that some teachers are grading like Google Classroom assignments on a point scale rather than just saying like pass, no credit, credit. So I don't know much about how like it's gonna work, but you know, I think it's easier to get a passing grade than it is to fail at this point. So
Yeah.
should be
Well, it's
interesting.
pretty hard to fail a class, right?
Right.
What do you think, Merritt?
Yeah, I agree with Michael on like half of the term 3 being like optional, because if some people like want to boost, like if they did well and they want to boost their GPA, I think that'd be a good option. But would the pass fail, would it be on our transcript and not affect our GPA?
It wouldn't affect your GPA.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I'm understanding what Mr. Smith and his team are thinking about.
Mhm.
You know, remember, everyone in this country is dealing with the same thing. And I
Yeah.
feel for you guys as juniors because, you know, I mean, right? Everybody talks about junior year. You know, coming into 11th grade, it's the one that matters, right? Everyone always says that. All the kids knew that when I was a high school principal. So all of a sudden, that's been like completely flipped upside down because, you know, kids, I think that some kids actually may, especially with boys, may not have taken stuff seriously in 9th and 10th grade, but then in 11th grade, they really knuckled down. And now they didn't really get the chance to do that. So there's a lot of anxiety around that. But remember, the colleges know this. They totally understand it. And I think that if I could say something to you guys, it's try not to worry too much about that. It's going to be okay. I say it to kids anyhow during the regular time when kids are getting all anxious about college acceptances and stuff. Just try to relax and have faith that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to. Because as an old guy, you know, this would be 40 years. This graduation this year would be 40 years for me out of Dover Sherborn. If you told me then that I was going to be the superintendent of schools with a doctorate from BC, I would have I think most people would have said that's not happening. So you just don't know in life. You really don't know. And I think you're going to be fine. So I don't know where that question, what was the question again? I lost track of it.
How grading will look like for third and
Oh
fourth.
yeah, how the grading was looking like. And I was asking you guys what you thought it should look like. So thank you for that question. I think that came from Luke. Any others? What's another one?
What is the current plan for seniors? One more last day of school be this year? And is there a plan to somehow hold a graduation ceremony?
Yeah, that's such a hard topic, right? I mean, if you think about, I guess for me, well, let me answer your question first. As I understand it, the last day is the 28th. That is potentially subject to change. I think the administration at the building level is looking at that, but the last I heard it was the 28th. The senior, you know, just the impact on seniors, but not seniors alone. All of the kids who have end of the year ceremonies, whether it's awards nights or any kind of recognition nights, the move up event at the middle school and at the elementary school, all those things have been taken away. And graduation, and prom, I mean, these things hurt us to hear this. I heard one time in one of my law courses in my doctoral program that cases have been made that graduation is a property right. In other words, when schools say, I'm going to take your graduation away, people have pushed back on that and said, you can't do that. Just because I got caught doing something against the school's rules, you can't take my graduation away because I have been looking forward to graduation my whole life. It is a life event. And that kind of puts it in perspective. It is a big deal, and we've lost it. So we're trying to find a way to do this that will meet the standards in terms of the law and being safe and responsible, but we're also, we also we want you guys to, our seniors especially, to have some kind of opportunity for recognition of all their hard work. So I think it's possible that there could be a very different looking graduation, right? I mean, there are things that places have done. So I'm not saying this is what will happen at Dover Sherborn, because I truly believe that the administration at the building level, working with kids and families down in the high school, should decide what they think is the best approach. But I know that some of the things that I've been hearing from different systems have involved working with the class just socially distanced on the field, but no family. That is one of the things that I've heard out there before. I've heard about people lining up in cars and coming to pick them up, their diplomas. So having the speeches on Zoom or broadcast somehow so people can hear them from their cars or watch them from their cars. But going through the process, but then having the diploma distribution just be by car or something like that. That's what one place is doing. Another place, I think it was Wellesley, I heard, or I don't know if it was Wellesley, but some places are talking about parades with the kids. I'm a little bit lukewarm on that idea because I'm not sure I want big long lines of kids hanging out of their cars, flying through town. I've been in a school system where that happened once. They used to have what they called beep day, and it was really dangerous. It was really, really dangerous. And what finally caused us to end it was that there was an accident. And I just remember a couple of kids going by in a Jeep Wagoneer, and the gate was open and they were hanging out the back, going like 50. So I'm not crazy about these parades. I think they can get out of control. But all of the options are on the table. Clearly, we need to work fast. Another thing that people have suggested is doing them later in the summer. But that's all assuming that you could get together later in the summer. So, and I think one of the great frustrations for the kids is that the kids don't seem to be getting the illness to the same degree that the adults do. So they're like, well, why can't we have it? And I understand that frustration, but you also have adults who participate who may not want it. So there's a lot to think about. What have you guys heard that you thought was not a bad idea, if there is such a thing? Because I don't know how you could replicate graduation, but have you heard of any ideas that you thought were not bad? What could you do? I mean, is there something that kids would actually want to do? Is there something? I'm really struggling to find something. What do you think, Lola?
I've seen a lot of the car things, but I didn't really think about it getting out of hand.
Yeah.
But I think people definitely want graduation no matter what. So it's like very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing that worries me. People around here, these are small towns who've known each other forever. Well, you guys have. I mean, the kids you grew up with. Your families know each other from soccer games or being on the soccer field or whatever. I mean, families know each other, and graduation is a family event. And so I worry that if we said, well, all the families can come, but they have to stay away from each other, it won't work. They won't. That's the problem. They won't. And so the other thing that you guys have to know is that whatever we do, we have to run through Board of Health. We can't just freewheel it. So yeah, and I'm not saying that it would go wrong, Lila, on something with the cars, but I'm wounded. I'm scarred from my past, so I think of those things. But have you heard of anything Michael or Merritt or Charlie, Luke, Jake, have you guys heard of anything that you thought was like, I heard that Air Force Academy just did social distancing and kids were like 8 feet apart and they basically got their diplomas and left.
Right. I think it's a lot of like the car stuff. That's the idea, but you know, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants that traditional graduation and trying to like get it to be like as close to a graduation, but you know, it doesn't really have the same effect, or you know, I guess it won't be, you know, that good memory that they'll have down the road.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you know, you have to do what you have to do, but I think that everybody wants that traditional graduation.
Yeah. So, you know, you guys may or may not have heard of this, but when I was a principal in Medfield, so you would have been little kids at that time, but at the graduation they had uh, diplomas for people who fought in World War II who left before they were able to graduate. And it was a big deal for those people. It was a huge deal for them. They were crying. They were so happy to be finally getting their diploma and walking across the stage at like 90 something years old. So it is a big deal. And the good news is that Mr. Smith totally gets it and feels it. So I think he and the folks around him are really trying to come up with something that will work. And it may not be perfect. It's pretty much certain that some people won't like it. I mean, how can you replicate something like a graduation? There is no, I don't know how you could do it. But we're on it. We're working on it. Another question?
I think the next question is, the online instruction is good, but doesn't give us the full classroom experience or learning opportunities. How will we bridge the gap in learning as we move into next year and the rest of the year?
How will we what, Lila?
How will we bridge the gap in learning when we move into next year, this year?
Yeah, well, so let's be honest. It isn't the same, right? And it's not going to be the same. I am sorry, I've heard that from people. I don't buy it. I don't think we're going to replicate what you guys experience when you go into a building every single day. Between the socialization with your teachers and with the other kids in your class, even the socialization that you don't like helps you to grow. You know, being uncomfortable when, you know, a lot of times when you're growing, it's uncomfortable. You don't like it. And those experiences are not happening. So I don't know that we'll ever be able to truly bridge that gap. But I do think that we're going to have to get out of the box, and it's not easy. I mean, the teaching that when I go into the classrooms at the middle school or the high school, or really any of the schools in the district, it looks a lot like it did when I was there. It really hasn't changed that much. So obviously our habits are hard to change, but we might have to say to kids, you know, kind of like the senior project type activities. So I remember, for those of you guys who know South Street in Sherborn, do any of you know where that is? South Street, it goes over to South Natick, it's down by Audubon. You know where that is, Charlie?
Yeah.
So right down, right before you cross the line into Natick, there's like a pond and a brook that goes under the road. It's really bumpy there.
Mhm.
Back in the day, so when I was in probably middle school, my friend's brother, who was probably 8 years older than him, did a senior project over there. And the project was to build a dam because the road kept getting washed out. And so he built a dam, and they did the engineering work. They, you know, worked with engineers, but it was done right. And that dam, you could still see remnants of it. I doubt that it's still working, but maybe it is. But that kind of learning is, it can be really useful and meaningful. And it's kind of what we've been saying to our teachers and to the broader community and to the school committee. We actually want different kinds of learning. Just you guys sitting in chairs all day long and being lectured at, that's not effective. I'm sorry. That is not the most effective type of learning. When you get older and you're my age, you think about the things, the places where you really learned a lot. It was usually experiential stuff. So I think with the remote learning, Lila, we need to come up with more creative, um, kind of authentic learning experiences for the kids. And that's not easy for us because we don't do a lot of that. But the closest thing I can think of to it are things like the CAG stuff at the middle school or senior projects. Those kinds of learning experiences, if really done right, can be very meaningful. So I think that is how we'll bridge the gap. And the question is, will we ever bridge the gap? I'm not sure. The question came up last night at a school committee meeting. How do you know if this stuff's working?
You don't.
I don't have an answer for that. I didn't have baseline data, right? So I don't know how much you were learning, exactly in the classrooms before, other than, MCAS. Anecdotally, teachers would say that kid really works hard, but really hard evidence of your learning would probably be the formalized assessments like AP and SATs and MCAS. But we don't have those in place for remote learning. So it's going to be really tough for us to assess the effectiveness of this. And that's worrisome for a lot of people. In fact, to that end, I read the other day, I will say this, I'm reading a lot more. I read the other day that there are states out there saying, that's it, we're pulling the plug on school. It's too hard on families, it's too hard on teachers. This year is over. We just ended the year, and that's the truth. States, not just towns, states. So not everyone is convinced that this has been worthwhile. I heard that I heard one of the teachers in the meeting the other day said the kid was zooming from his boat while out fishing. I thought that was interesting. So, but on the other hand, being out fishing on a boat is not a terrible thing. I'm sorry, but I think it's good for you. Are you guys, by the way, I wanted to ask you, do you find you're getting enough rest?
Yeah.
More sleep?
Yeah, I think it's nice that like we don't really start till 10, or even like I don't start till 11 every day because my first classes for Mondays, Wednesdays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, like I don't have like a core class that I don't have to go to, so I can sleep in till 10:30. So yeah, I woke up today at about 10:30, so it's nice to get the rest and just open up my laptop and join the Zoom call.
Do you feel differently?
I definitely feel more rested than I would going to bed at like midnight or 11 on a school night, having to wake up at 6. So it's nice to have that rest, a couple more hours. So
yeah, I mean, there are some silver linings, right?
Yeah,
There are some silver linings.
definitely.
Were you gonna say that, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like, again, one of the big ones is rest. I feel like with school, like getting up super early, like having to like do all these things before school, like breakfast, like drive, all that stuff. I feel like I'm up so early, but now it's like a 4, almost 5 hour difference. So
Yeah.
definitely helps.
Simple stuff for me. You asked me like what my day is like. I haven't worn a tie for 6 or 7 weeks. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you though, I'm missing the gym. I'm missing it a lot. I could barely put these pants on this morning because I've gained weight and I'm just not getting the exercise. So that's not good. My dogs have never been happier. Even the cat's getting kind of active. I think the cat's losing weight. And she's always around. So all right, well, we're running out of time. Do you guys have any more questions, thoughts, suggestions? I mean, you've got the superintendent's ear. Merritt.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about are we still doing the new schedule and start time next year with this
Yes,
whole?
so that's a great question, and it actually came up last night. So the start time change is going forward, because it is true that we might have some form of remote learning. It could look really, really different, right? I mean, we could have some of the things that have been floated out there across the state and maybe even the country are smaller classes, like of 10 kids at a time, and therefore rotating them. remote one day, in school the next, which would be really tough on some families. So I'm not sure that that's going to come to fruition. But we don't think that that's going to make any difference in terms of the start times. We still believe in the science that originally pushed us to do this. And basically the science said, just as you said, Michael, getting up, or maybe it was Charlie, but getting up at 6 in the morning and after going to bed at midnight, like that's just not enough sleep for teenagers. And we know, because we do those youth risk behavior surveys, we know from the kids that sometimes they unravel. They're just not getting enough rest, and therefore everything kind of gets, and the intensity of day-to-day living, and as a high school kid in America, it's a lot. So we're not convinced that suddenly we should change that. We still believe that we should stick with it. So yeah, so the plan is to go forward with that, and so therefore you'll have that new schedule. I think Mr. Smith has told you guys about the new schedule with the X block.
Yeah.
So it'll be a little different. I actually think that's going to be really awesome, to be honest with you. So, and think about all the work we've done at this point. We've gone way down the road to suddenly say, yeah, no, we're not going to do it. I get it. Yeah, we may be in this pandemic still, but I still don't. The school committee didn't feel the need for change, and I'm not recommending it. Good question. Excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. What else?
Well, you touched upon this earlier about how we're going to get new guidelines for the online learning, for the rest of the year. So do you think you can tell us what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so there may be more, there's a push for more check-in time. There is a push for, and by check-in time, I mean more face-to-face stuff like this. And interestingly, that's what people have said to us in town too. Like, look, I'm not necessarily saying there should be more academics, because the academics, they get that we can't necessarily teach the standard class in the traditional way. But the parents especially say, we do know that our kids respond well to knowing that they have a check-in. Like,
Right.
they need it in the midst of all this kind of malaise. It's good for them to check in with their classmates and their teacher. So we see that as part of it. We know that there are standards for the state that the state has developed. When you guys take the MCAS, it's all based on the state's standards. And the state standards are basically say, these are the things a kid should know or be able to do at the end of 9th grade. These are the things that a kid should know or be able to do at the end of 10th grade by each subject area. So there are standards for each subject for all grades. And what the commissioner is saying is that in this next stretch, we should be looking at those standards and seeing, kind of identifying the bare bones non-negotiables that have to be met between now and the end of the year by grade level. And it's about letting the parents know what they are, and the teachers, and of course the kids, and teaching, making sure that our instruction is refined and really kind of honed in on those key pieces, because there's been a lot of lost ground, and you can kind of hit them when you hit them when in a regular brick and mortar day, but now we need to be more deliberate about making sure that we're focusing in on these standards. So that is one of the things. And then supporting kids. Like, this is a lot that we're all grappling with. And when you're a kid and you're only 16, 17, 18 years into it, or 7 or 8, you're just a kid. Some of the stuff that you guys are being bombarded with, whether on the TV or on your computers, like if you have a news feed, like I'm on the Apple news feed or Google News, the stuff that comes at you is intense and heavy, right? I mean, you see images, terrible images of people who have died or whatever. That's a lot for kids to be looking at. and to be hearing about without being able to process with anyone else, it's just a ton, especially in isolation. So we know that we need to continue to support our kids. I feel like the teachers and administrators and guidance people are trying to do that, but we just want to double down on it and make sure we're doing that well. And by the way, Michael, it's a good question, but I think we actually have already been doing remote learning phase 3 according to the state. We pretty much have been doing it, but now we're going to just refocus.
All right. Thank you.
Do you think kids say it's too much or too little?
Just like personally, I think that there is like more work than I expected to be for online, with just a couple check-ins. But I think it's, I think it's the right amount at this point. I think that like any more work might get, a little stressful, but it's not in my hands. So that's just my opinion though.
Have you had any assignments that are different and out of the box compared to what you would normally do?
Like for example, my physics class, we take like tests on like Google Forms, and it grades you like in real time after you submit your answers. And then if you have to show your work, you'll just write it on a piece of paper, take a picture, and attach it as a file. So I mean, it's kind of an inconvenience, but it's what you got to do. So.
Well, what about things like, interviewing your grandparents or something about their life during the Depression or something like that? Have you had any kind of different kinds of assignments that you didn't typically have?
Not really, but we'll see if anything changes. So.
What about you guys, Charlie, Lila, Merritt, Luke, Jake? Any of you guys have any assignments or experiences that were a little different? This is different, right? This is different than TV studio typically is.
We had
All right, you go ahead.
we had a project that was like due while school was still going, but like someone Zoomed their grandparents and talked about it was like for an English project, and so like that was different. He utilized not being able to see her in person.
Yeah.
And submitted that. Otherwise, it's pretty typical. And like I know some teachers have been going more like research based, use your online resources, where before they would have just given you a document and that type of thing. But no, otherwise, not really.
Interesting. That sound familiar to you guys as well, Charlie, Merritt?
Yeah.
Good. One last chance here. Anything you would suggest we do differently? And if you say nothing, that's good.
I just know for the last time, like when we had talked to Mr. Smith, they had just come out with the schedule, and a lot of people were like still confused. So maybe if you guys are coming out with like another like form of like, oh, like this is the new learning, just like I know a lot of people want like structure from their teachers where it's really inconsistent. But that's the only thing I've like heard from other people.
So more consistent.
From like all your teachers, yeah. Because like the Zoom calls are like they're sometimes optional, and then some teachers they're not, and it can just be a lot.
Yeah. Adding on to that, I think like a lot of teachers, I'm sorry, but I think a lot of teachers like assign like the work on a Monday or even a Sunday, just make it due for a Friday, and then it's kind of like see you then, like, but so.
So it might be. So are you saying it would be better if you could get like some feedback along the way, Michael?
Yeah, and I guess having like all the work assigned in like installments, I guess, like and so on a Tuesday or a Thursday, assign the work.
Excellent.
Yeah, my English teacher has done a like good job where we meet on Monday, like the first block, like every Monday, to kind of go over like, because she'll post like the schedule on the previous Friday, so we can like look at it over the weekend just to like get a feel for what we're gonna have to do for the week, which I think is really helpful so that we know like what we have to do. And then on Monday we have a Zoom, and she kind of just like goes over like what we have to do and like the due dates, and like sometimes there'll be like 2 due dates, but they're like, it's instead of having like everything due on a Friday, it's like little pieces due on like Tuesday and Thursday, and then so I really like how she does that.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
that's really, really good feedback, and it's good to hear because it's consistent with the feedback that I've been receiving. So believe it or not, it makes it all the way up to me that this is what kids and families are looking for. And of course, I would love it if I could just wave a magic wand and have all that consistency or have everyone teach the same way. But, we know part of the beauty of education is, in fact, running into people who do things differently, right? So, so somewhere in there is the balance, but it's awesome feedback. So, listen, I'm going to let you guys go. We're going to wrap up this edition of Keough's Corner. I'm looking forward to doing it again, and I hope you guys are able to still find some joy in your lives and get out there, get some exercise, get some fresh air today. It's supposed to be pretty lousy tomorrow and the next day, but it's going to improve on Saturday. So awesome seeing you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Sweeney, for setting us up with this conversation.